Welcome back. As you know, GB News, and in particular this show, are doing a leadership series where we're trying to interview each of the 6 candidates ahead of them being narrowed down to 2 by November. And last week we had Robert Jenrick, and this week we've got Mel Stride, the MP for Central Devon, in the studio with us. Lovely to see you, Mel. You've had a busy time going around the country, visiting Conservative associations,
Indeed,
telling people that you're not the underdog, or you're an underdog that has got a bite. I think
well, absolutely. Look, David Cameron, who had that famous victory in 2005,
yes,
was 25-1 with the bookies 1 week before the conference at which he gave that speech, and swept all before him.
All right.
This is a long race, and
all
I'm
right,
coming up the rails, all right?
All right. Why do it, though, Mel? I mean, what's it all about? Because, yes, you did make your name not only as Work and Pension Secretary, you introduced a lot of measures on worklessness, which I think were certainly welcomed warmly by the right of the party.
Yeah.
And you were Mr. Broadcast Round, so we saw you a lot on GB News during the election campaign. I don't think anyone had previously singled you out as somebody with leadership ambitions. What's it all about?
So I think we're at a critical juncture for our party. We've clearly lost our way very badly. And I think in terms of reuniting the party, getting the right political platform together and reorganising ourselves as a fighting machine, I am best placed to deliver that and to connect with the electorate. We've got to rediscover our vision as a party. Now, my background was I went into Parliament age 48. Everybody tells me we need politicians that haven't been politicians all their lives.
Yes.
We want people with real-world experience. Well, that is me. What I did was I went out and set up my own businesses here in the UK and also in the United States. That meant getting together with people around the kitchen table, getting ideas together, unifying people, enthusing them, climbing those mountains and, making things happen. And I believe that's what the Conservative Party really needs now. Now, work and pensions that you mentioned, Camilla, I've driven some of the most fundamental reforms in a generation, seeing billions of pounds saved from the welfare budget at the same time as having hundreds of thousands of people on that journey to work. That's the level of reform and drive for reform that we need in the Conservative Party now.
Those reforms are welcome, but funny enough, I had a little conversation with John Redwood before he came on air, and we were just talking about you and the welfare reforms. The only problem with them were that they were stalled by a year. So Redwood was saying there were lots of righties in the party who wanted them to be implemented immediately, and then they were pushed into 2025. Right. So you haven't necessarily landed them, because Labour could now reverse them, couldn't they?
So, look, I was 18 months in post. Reform that is fundamental and affects millions of people and their livelihoods. They're big decisions. You have to consult on them quite properly. Otherwise, you get challenged in the courts and they get overturned. Yeah. So you have to do things in the right way. But we proceeded at pace. Now, the Office for Budget Responsibility, which is an independent body, assesses my reforms as meaning 400,000 fewer people going into those long-term sickness and disability benefits than would otherwise be the case. And they've also scored, with the Treasury, billions of pounds worth of savings. Now, you can't do that at the flick of a switch. No. It takes a lot of hard work, working with officials to get that done. But I got it done. And so I know that I can bring that to the Conservative Party.
OK, so when you looked under the bonnet, what was the issue? Obviously, post-COVID, we had more people out of work. People will blame 14 years of Conservative rule for encouraging more people into benefits and out of work. I mean, the party has to take some responsibility. I appreciate the work you did in the last 18 months, but how did it get to a situation where I think Fraser Nelson at The Spectator had done a lot of work in this area, sort of 9 million people who could work not working?
So, look, let's just...
Very anti-Thatcherite, isn't it?
Let's just unpack this and get the reality of what's happened, OK? The first thing is our record on employment is excellent as a government. So we had near highest level of employment in our history, near lowest level, in fact half the level.
Went wrong.
But that's important. Secondly, on economic inactivity, which is where you get the 9 million figure from, that, for example, includes students. There are over 2 million.
And I think early retirees, perhaps.
Early retirees, etc. But if you compare to where we are on economic inactivity compared to when Labour was in office, we have a lower level than every year under the last Labour government, and we're lower than the average across the OECD, the G7, and across the EU. So the overall picture, relatively, is not bad. But, Camilla, and this is where you're right, long-term sickness and disability, off the back of COVID, particularly a rise in mental health issues amongst particularly young people, has been a major driver of that. And that's why my reforms around the work capability assessment, which is the gateway into these benefits, has meant 400,000 fewer people going onto those benefits. And I was also consulting on personal independence payments to see how that could be more effective and more efficient as well.
Solve this dilemma for us, because this was in the papers this morning, and there was a report in the Mail on Sunday which had kind of exposed a few rogue doctors that are signing people off sick with no meeting with them, not even online, no evidence for the fact they're sick. One girl, I think, said she basically wanted to spend some time at the beach because she needed a holiday. She gets a sick note for 25 quid. How do we crack down on that? Because it seems to me that if you're a patient and you turn up at your doctor's and say, I'm stressed out, I need 4 weeks off work, you just get it.
The overall problem with sick notes is as follows. That doctors on average have about 6 minutes to give you when you come along and say, I'm not feeling great, I need to be signed off. On 94% of occasions, they tick a box that says, totally incapable of any work whatsoever, which doesn't do you a lot of good when you're sitting there feeling very down to be told that you can't possibly work.
No.
In only 6% of occasions do they tick a box that says, well, might be available with appropriate support. I brought something called Work Well in, which means that instead of just having that box ticked, you actually get referred to an employment specialist alongside the mental health support that you need in a one-stop shop. And the first thing that they aim to do, Camilla, is to keep you in work because it's good for you. Now, that might mean liaising with your employer, and if you've got a bad hip, moving your desk down to the ground floor instead of it being on the up floor. It could be small changes.
Life easier.
But stop that journey that starts with people falling out of work.
Those doctors, what do we do about them, Mel? If they're signing people off sick online for 25 quid, should they be struck off? What should happen with them?
If anybody in the medical profession is behaving unprofessionally and simply dishing out sick notes where people pay them and for no other reason, they're not being diligent, then clearly action should be taken.
What do you mean?
The General Medical Council or...
exactly.
Somebody like that should be looking at that particular issue. But there is a broader issue of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of these fit notes being signed off every year and people going on this longer-term journey to longer-term benefits and getting very distant from the workforce.
All right.
So my plan, which was being rolled out and Labour may scrap, was to get in early, head it off at the pass, keep people in work rather than letting them drift out.
I've got lots more to ask you. A couple of personal questions first, though. You've only got a majority of 61.
Yes.
So you're in a really precarious position come 2029 to lead the party on such a small majority.
OK, well, look, I'm very proud of the fact that I won when many much, much safer seats than mine were lost.
But, a future Conservative leader might want to brag that they've won more convincingly than you did.
Well, no, I managed to win, as I say, when I should have lost. OK, the exit poll, I was told by Nick Robertson just after 10 o'clock, Mr. Stride, what do you have to say? You've clearly lost. Well, I didn't. I hung on because I'm a fighter and I was out there fighting every single day. Look, we've got to get beyond worrying about a seat like mine if we're going to get back into contention.
So
we've got to be winning my seat with a 15 to 20,000 majority, which is what it was, and we've got to be bringing back all those seats which were previously safe and more.
And how about when people say, look, you're never going to win this, you're just doing it to boost your profile?
No, not at all. As I say, David Cameron, for example, who was a rank outsider, as you described me earlier, a week before, he went out and delivered that extraordinary speech at party conference and came through and won. It was 25 to 1.
Up your sleeve,
I think
Mel?
I gave an extraordinary one last night in Gloucestershire, which went down extremely well at the hustings. All 6 of us.
You mentioned
and I had
Cameron.
People flocking to me afterwards saying, the more we see of you, Mel Stride, the more we like it.
Right.
So,
this is the Conservative...
And there's time.
This is the Conservative broad church spectrum.
Yep.
We've got, on the right here, John Redwood and Margaret Thatcher. And on the left of the party here, we could say, as you've just mentioned him, David Cameron and George Osborne. This is a spectrum. Where's Mel Stride?
OK, so I don't think these spectrums and labels... No, because you've set up this false question. I don't accept the premise that you've laid out, because I think if you take your so-called right end of the spectrum, you will probably say low net migration, low illegal migration, low taxes.
Everything the Conservatives promised but didn't deliver.
They're not a preserve of the right. They're things I passionately believe in, and people on the so-called left of the party. They're common ground issues.
Well, so many people come into the studio saying that they believe in low tax and low immigration, and yet lo and behold, the Tories face an Armageddon because they don't deliver on either of those promises.
But I'll tell you...
not just in this Parliament, but in previous ones.
Look, let me tell you how we're going to deliver on lower taxes, OK, and the importance of doing so. How we deliver is by running a more efficient government and public sector.
OK.
We deliver reforms in welfare, which I have already started.
How do you gain efficiencies? Do you sack civil servants?
No, what
do
about...
you cut government departments?
You improve productivity, OK? And productivity of the public sector in some places like the NHS has even been going backwards despite the large amounts of additional funding that's gone in. But on welfare, where we went into the last election, our manifesto had huge tax cuts. 2/3 of those tax cuts, £12 billion worth, was paid for by the reforms that I was bringing through in welfare. There's enough in welfare to make a difference. Now, why tax cuts really matter is we've got an intergenerational challenge as a party. We've got to reach out to younger voters.
Yeah.
We're going to have to come up with a very big, bold offer for younger people. Tax is going to play a part in that. I think we can have creative approaches to that.
Yes.
We could, for example, say to those taking on their first job, that perhaps, say, the first £5,000 of their national insurance doesn't go to the taxman, it goes into a hypothecated fund that's there, for example, as a deposit on a property. We've got to be creative, but we've got to find the fiscal space in order to do that. And that's why I'm the person to do it, because I've demonstrated
All right, so you're good at creating fiscal space. Tell me then, which tax do you cut first? So
one of the taxes that are no-brainers are the so-called Laffer taxes, where you can cut them and get more revenue.
The old Laffer curve, I vaguely remember
Arthur Laffer and his napkin in the restaurant.
That's right.
In other words, if you tax people 100%, you get nothing. If you tax them zero, you get nothing.
State the ones that you would like to tax.
So stamp duty, property, stamp duty, land tax, because it's transaction-based tax. It's 12% at the higher level, ludicrously high. And it means that all those painters and decorators and white van man that comes in and gets involved and it helps their businesses.
So we've got that one.
Don't get that because
corporation
the transaction
tax, should that come down?
Corporation tax, we want to see low. It is
the lowest. Businessman?
It is the lowest.
It should be lowest
in the G7 at the moment. So we shouldn't get too carried away with it.
You thrived with your business when you had corporation tax.
I did. Nigel Rawson did fantastic things.
Rates. Well, why don't you return to Lawsonian government?
We definitely, I've said, we definitely need to be looking at corporation tax, small business tax as well. The taxes we really need to lean on and get down are the ones that drive employment and jobs and growth.
Yes.
So we need tax reliefs on investment.
I love all this, Mel, but I sit here and listen to this, but you were in the government that presided over the biggest tax burden since the Second World War. We can blame COVID for that. We can blame Ukraine. Equally, you all come into the studio and talk such a good game on immigration, and yet none of you in government have ever honoured your manifesto pledges to bring it down legally and illegally. What happened to David Cameron's tens of thousands? Can you make a pledge in the studio to say that you'd put a cap on legal migration?
You've asked two questions. One is the tax burden. The tax burden did rise, as it did in many other countries, because we spent $400 billion supporting businesses and families through COVID and a cost of living crisis caused by the European war. So that's what happens when you spend a lot of money, unless you're fiscally irresponsible and borrow it instead. But it was coming down.
Tories were the ones who put corporation tax up, though. Let's not forget that.
The taxes were
small and medium-sized businesses won't forget that, I'm sure.
Taxes were coming down. National insurance, including small and medium-sized businesses, were coming down. But we need to do more. But on your point about migration, yes, I do think that we need to have a cap. I think it needs to be probably in the tens of thousands. I also think something else, that we need to probably have some link between the kind of pressures that migration brings in terms particularly of housing and the level of migration that we think is right.
How much housing should we be building? The Labour Party have kept David Cameron's target 300,000.
1.5 million over the 5 years,
well,
300,000
better than the Tories. They only managed a million.
No, we did 1 million in the last Parliament and 2.5 million since 2010, and we
$1 million in a Parliament versus
under the last
1.5 million in a Parliament.
Let's get trading statistics. Get one fact very clear. Under the last Labour government, we saw house building its lowest level since the 1920s. So I'll take no lectures from Labour on building housing.
What would you set your target at?
I think that is one of those areas where the parliamentary party needs to come together and work through our proposal. Now, you're quite rightly asking these questions, but we have 5 years now to the next general election, and I think it's absolutely right that on issues like that, and the ECHR would be another example, where they are highly contentious, they need to be thought through.
Will you leave the ECHR if necessary?
Carefully. Right, we're dotting around a lot here.
No, I know, because
let's go for it. On the ECHR, we need to come to a settled position across the parliamentary party. To make a stark position on the ECHR in this contest, I believe, is a misstep. Because if you win this contest partly on the basis of saying we're going to leave and that's it, you will go back to a parliamentary party, many of whom will say, I'm sorry, I'm not going with that.
Well, few of them might have.
And that doesn't drive unity.
To be fair.
But what I would say, as a matter of principle, is I will not allow the ECHR, or anything else for that matter, stand in the way of us being able to deliver an effective deterrent to illegal crossings. Because that, we know, is the element that drives solving the problem. A form of Rwanda, I think, should definitely be on the table. Look, we saw with Albania, where you had a returns policy, people coming here going straight back. The numbers dropped by 90% almost overnight.
If people are coming here from safe countries, should they be able to stay? Yes or no?
Well, if they're genuine refugees
if they're coming from
under
safe
genuine
countries,
schemes,
they can't be refugees, can they?
Well, no, of course, we shouldn't be having a situation where people are coming to France, staying in Calais and then coming across here. Absolutely not. But look, deterrence works, Camilla. We saw what happened with people from Northern Ireland beginning to go into the Republic when they saw the Rwanda scheme coming on board. We saw the pause in crossings while they waited for a Labour government because they were worried about Rwanda.
I'm steamrolling ahead because I want to get to a couple more responses just on the riots. Do you think it was right for anti-racism protesters to protest outside the headquarters of Reform UK this weekend?
I think if there are peaceful demonstrations, that is fine.
But Reform
in
UK,
general.
basically, they're conflating Nigel Farage and Reform with the far right.
Nigel Farage,
is he far right?
I've been very vocal on Nigel Farage and his role in these riots and his comments on it. I think he has been very wrong and misguided to have called into question, for example, early on the truthfulness of the police around what happened in that awful situation. In Southport. I wouldn't describe Nigel Farage in those terms.
So
but he's a
why
populist.
are anti-racism protesters
that's a
conflating
matter. That's a question for them.
Right?
If there's peaceful protest, it's peaceful process, and that we're a country that allows free speech and protest, and we should, stand by that.
Final cue.
But populism is the thing that has to be called out here, Camilla.
Well, populism's quite popular, isn't it? If you had been more populist in the Tories, you might have won the election.
No, there's a distinction here. Having popular policies is one thing, and we should strive for those, absolutely. But being a populist means setting up a them against us, the bogeyman, the people that aren't being truthful for you, the police that aren't being fair, the government that's not on your side.
We're going into law and order in just a minute, and we're running out of time.
But Mel,
what do you think about people who have been online and maybe incited people to riot, then being put in prison? Is that a good use of prison, our crowded prison space? Or would you rather see them on the streets repairing the damage?
We now have to accept that the online world is part of the real world in the sense that it leads to real consequences. And where people do that kind of thing, they should face the full force of the law.
Mel Stride, thank you. We got through a lot.
We did. I wish we had more time.
Good to see you on a different kind of broadcast round in the GB News studio, and good luck in the leadership race. Thank you very much.